to play chess online or learn how to improve? Join us at the #1 chess destination in the world, chess.com. With hundreds of thousands of people playing at any moment, you'll quickly find a game with someone at your level, whether you're a total beginner or a grandmaster. You can play games at any pace against friends, other members, or one of our many computer personalities. Chess.com makes improving fun and easy. Sharpen your game with tactics puzzles and enhance your strategy with our videos and lessons by top masters. Learn from your own games with Chess.com's easy-to-use analysis tool. Regardless of your skill level, Chess.com has all you need to take your game to the next level. Chess.com is your go-to source for chess news, live coverage of tournaments, events, and everything in between. Experience Chess.com anytime and anywhere, whether you're at home on your computer or on the go with our mobile apps. Signing up is free and easy, so what are you waiting for? Join Chess.com today.
Hello and welcome everyone. This is FIDE Grand Prix 2022 and we are now in the tiebreakers, and I'm honored to be joined by International Master David Pruess. Welcome David at the show.
How kind of you, Katie. Hi, it's great to be here with you.
Thank you. David, we have seen a lot yesterday where Wesley So blundered a piece, and Tabatabai bounced back and caught him on a tactic and won the game. Let's take a look at the bracket and see what happened and what's the situation for it now. So in the match of Wesley So and Tabatabai, who do you think is standing better after all these two classical games?
Yeah, I think obviously score-wise they're tied, but Wesley So is the higher rated player, and he's got a lot more experience in this kind of event, in high stakes events. He's got more experience in rapid chess as well, because Tabai is only just now breaking into the level of chess where you get to play at a bunch of rapid chess. You know, normally when you're 2,500 to 2,600, you don't play that many rapid events. So Wesley's going to have a big experience advantage here. And he'll be pretty well favored in rapid, by me at least.
Right. Wesley said after yesterday's game that Tabatabai is very good at tactics, and he got a chance. He used that chance, and he had not much to say as he played this weird move, knight to h4, and he lost the game in few moves after. In the other match, they have made 2 draws. The first game was rather fast and not too much of complications. And yesterday, in the symmetrical position, they keep it go and tried their chances until the very end game, but it was a draw. And in fact, Hikaru Nakamura had just a slightly better position in the opening, and then at some point he had to let it go and go to the end game. We thought that maybe he was just upset because he missed this opportunity and he knew it. But anyway, in this match of Hikaru Nakamura and Shahriar Mamedyarov, Hikaru is also a bit favored as he has won more of the rapid games and also blitz games. Let's take a look why I just mentioned rapid and also blitz games, David, because we do have 2 rapid games at the beginning, 15 minutes plus 10 seconds. And if that's a draw, then we're going to have 2 blitz games with 3 minutes plus 2 seconds. And if that's also a draw, then David, what's going to happen?
Yeah, then it'll be a final Armageddon game with Black having draw odds. So basically Black gets a little bit less time and White needs to win the game to go ahead. If Black draws or wins, they go ahead. Generally slightly favors Black, but it also depends matchup by matchup, player by player. When you look at a match between Nakamura and Mamedyarov that has 2 draws so far, if they draw a bunch more games today, then when you get to the Armageddon, you'll have this sense that it's going to favor Black quite a bit. If you get a match like Wesley's and Tabatabai, where you get, maybe players trading wins with White, then then they might actually want White in that game.
Right, David, what do you feel? Are we going to see Armageddon today?
I would say it's a 1 in 6 chance, maybe about 16% chance, maybe. I think it's more likely that somebody wraps it up in the blitz, but it's possible. It's possible.
Let's hope for that. I really want to see Armageddon. I have not seen for a long time, but you guys make sure that you vote. Because voting ends in just after 10 moves and you have to hurry up. Go to chess.com/events, navigate to the tournament, select a game. We just have last 2 games, so that's not really hard process and you can do it. And after you select a game, then click vote and guess the result. Yes, and as I mentioned, it only lasts for first 10 moves, so they will blitz out all these 10 moves as they are playing rapid games now, 2 games, and they will not lose any of time at the beginning in the opening. David, we are going to take a break now, and we will be back right before the first moves. So guys, don't go anywhere because you don't want to miss these tiebreakers. Welcome everyone back at the FIDE Grand Prix 2022, and we are here, David, to wait for the first moves. I can see that it's already 3 p.m. Central European time, which means that they will play the first moves right away at the break. We were considering whom to vote and how the votes are going, and then we started to think what will be the first move, right? So let's bring the bird's eye view and check out these matches and just try to predict what should we. Oh, there is already first move in the one game, so we cannot really predict anymore there.
Yeah, B3. That's a surprise there. B3. All right. We're in blitz openings and rapid games at this point. And a Jobava London from Tabatabai. Wow.
Okay, this is a bit surprising. So we're choosing this game Hikaru Nakamura and Shahrer Mamudyarov, and if something goes crazy in the other game,
something already has gone crazy in the other game too. Was that a mouse slip, that E3, E4?
Oh, wow.
No, it really was E4. Look at that.
So the idea of E4 is that if you take that by the pawn, I'll go D5 and then I'll try to get E4 pawn.
Yeah. And so it becomes an Albin counter gambit with an extra move played. And you know, it's very weird. I saw a game in this very opening on chess.com the other day, and it had an extremely long name. You know how chess.com puts a name for the opening that you've never heard of, like the so-and-so variation of the something, something, something. It was like every single move had its own name, so that the full name became rather long after C5 and E4. So I just saw this recently in an amateur game. An attempt at an improved Albin counter gambit. The game I saw, black played D takes E4, white played D5, and it felt just like an Albin. But here, Wesley is trading on D4, playing knight C6, and really challenging white's opening by going after the queen for a tempo here, or a bishop pair.
Right. Bishop to B5 now, pinning the knight. And how black should respond now to unpin this knight.
Right. So basically the threat from white is pawn takes D5. And the other, juice that's coming that black needs to be ready for is a white rook on D1. So black's got to be careful on this next move here. Yeah. If we played D.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say, if black takes on E4, white can trade on D8, castle queenside with check. All right, let's just have a quick look at that. We could get this. Now, often the king likes to hide on C7 after an early queen trade in this kind of opening here. That's not possible. So we're looking at bishop D7 or king E8, which look about equivalent. I don't know which one's better, but let's just put one on the board and try and estimate what would be happening here. White is still down a pawn. There's no quick way to clean this up. And there's no quick way to threaten knight C7. That would be a way to go for something quick, but black's knight is covering this square, and a move like bishop A4, it's just too slow. So I don't think there's any immediate tactics for white. Bishop C7 threatening mate in 1, but black would develop and prevent it. So probably you just go knight E2, knight G3, and try to get the pawn back. And white can probably get their pawn back faster than black can catch up in development.
Right. David, instead of going to this line with extra pawn in the end game, black decided to go for A6, kick this bishop. You are now forced to take the knight, because if you play bishop A4, then B5, and you don't want that complication and too much of the sacrifices, you will just lose a queen. So white was forced to take this knight on C6. As you pointed out, white gave up the pair of bishop. It takes C6, and now white is to move. Do you think he will trade one more pawn on d5 and then rook d1 or castle on the long side, or that's too risky here to castle?
I think that white will not trade here. Whether or not castling queenside is too risky or not is actually, I think, the best question about this position, because that's the way you really add the most power for white, is bringing that rook to d1. But it's very, very risky with the b file open to castle queenside. At the moment, you've got b8 covered, so it's not an immediate risk. It's more of a medium to long-term risk. I'm not a fan of trading on d5 until you have to, because as long as you don't, you have an extra possibility with e5. And so basically you're trading your e pawn for the c6 pawn. The c6 pawn's not very strong here. So I would only make that trade if I were really ready and it was the only thing I wanted to do anymore.
There is this point that you can take this pawn on d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, and then to play knight a4. And as b6 is a kind of holder on the queen side, and b8 square is already controlled by the rook, you might also try to go after this rook. And in the worst case, you can always take back this light square bishop, and the opponent will not have the pair bishop advantage.
Right. See if you can't just trap the opponent's rook before you get to move 10. That's a really cool idea. That's a really cool idea. It feels to me like there would have to be some way for black to defend against it, this early on, but it's not at all obvious how, because even moving the bishop doesn't give the rook a new square to go to. There's still knight b6. So
right.
Yeah,
yes,
interesting idea.
David, for instance, if you play something like 95 maybe in this, or here, like for instance e6, developing move, just guarding d5, then knight b6, and after rook a7, this rook, you think that is just guarded then for a while. There can be some things like knight to c8 to take this bishop, and then rook on a7. So that's a bit risky situation. Yeah. Maybe after e takes d5, black should consider to take by knight and try to take the just eliminate
trade an extra piece like that. But that's very pleasant for white to leave black with this pawn here, I think. Very pleasant, I would think. And you can castle queenside, piling on the pressure. And I would be very happy to have this kind of position for white. One thing you can do is move this knight to e4 and play c4, which is weird since I just put the king there. But if you can play c4 early on and get into the d6 square, I would imagine that black's having a tough time.
True. David, after quite some time of thinking, Tabatabai went for e5 because now knight is under attack. And Wesley decided to bring this knight all the way back at the starting position to g8. I think he was just afraid of the move, like if knight d7, then maybe e6 is there just to ruin the pawn structure. And then knight f3, and there was always an issue of the dark square bishop on f8 and the king as well. So there can be some
still I'm a little surprised for black to back away from this, because and Wesley made that choice pretty quickly, because knight g8, I mean that's definitely not great. It's going to be a little slow to get these pieces out. And I don't know how great the danger is from knight d7, because yes, the bishop gets buried for a while, but at the same point, black's got 4 center pawns here, right? With which to try to push white back. And so in this position with knight f3, I could see c5 chasing pieces away, and queen b6, etc. So I'm not sure that Wesley was right to back away from knight d7, which would normally be the preferred move. But should we see who the other game is favoring out of the opening?
Yes, please. Let's take a look at the other game of Hikaru Nakamura and Shahriar Mamadero. We can already see the pawn on g4 and knight on e5, but the engine bar says that That's not too much for white here. Black is better. What can be the issue of that? The reason of that?
Well, I mean, G4 is a weakening move, basically. B3 also weakens the C file. So basically, white's game is based on blockading these two squares and keeping the black rooks and queens sort of trapped on their side of the board. If the black rooks and queens can get going, then white's got weaknesses all over the place. And you know, does the G pawn want to do anything here? It doesn't want to play G5, knight H5. That doesn't help white at all. So right now, I think white's got some heavy weaknesses to try to justify in this position. Yeah, it looks like a very risky opening by Hikaru.
Yeah, it seems like this G4 was the move that he was chasing the light square bishop. There might be some pin. Yeah,
maybe he wasn't sure how else to untangle the queen on D1, but this is where he played G4. And yeah, I mean, it's sort of an exchange queen's gambit kind of structure. And if you think of the exchange queen's gambit, you wouldn't normally see black play a move like G5 there. So that's definitely, I mean, we could think what his other choices were. Was he excited to play G4, or did he feel like he had nothing else to do?
Yeah, that's a good point. But David, I see G5 on the board by Shak.
Oh,
Can
wow.
we take a look at the current position G5?
G5. Interesting. Does that say he was at all scared of G5? Because I was just saying that I wouldn't be scared of it, but you know, could be quite wrong.
Well, if you play knight F3, knight D2 F3 now to target G5 pawn, the knight comes on E4, centralizes this knight and also guards the G5 pawn. And this is a very good position for black. There's nothing to worry here for black. And you can always play F6 next move, kick this knight back from E5 and guard your G5 pawn. So we do have, no, we don't have yet the move from Hikaru after G5.
Right. Oh, I think G5, I've got a thought. I think it was not to prevent G5 from white, but to prevent F4 from white.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, right, I said it's very important for Hikaru to keep this blockade on D4 and E5. So the most obvious move for black, I would say, is Queen C7. Because you'd be looking to threaten the weaknesses on the C file. And by pressuring E5, you're hoping to get white to trade the knight off of E5. Then you can open up the game. If black could ever play E5, for example, in a post-trade world, if you could ever somehow play E5 for black, then you can sort of show the weakness of white's king. So perhaps what Mamedyarov was afraid of was that white was going to play F4 at some point and really hold that E5 square. And maybe that's where this comes from here.
Yeah, after G5 here, Hikaru spent like about some seconds and hits right back with C4 in the center. Maybe he wants to play just to rook C1 next move and develop this side, Queen E2, hold the knight 25, not allow another knights to come on E4 and just, you know, make next moves. But David, the other game, which is just below your video, this is crazy. Knight on E4.
Yeah.
This knight is untouchable. You cannot really take this knight because there is a checkmate in the back rank. And then the knight tries to get on D6 or C5 at some point.
Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like that knight's just coming flying into D6 in a moment. I mean, let's say black played a move to try and force the issue by removing the threat on D8. You could play Queen A5. You could play Bishop E7, which would be kind of a wasted move, but because you're going to have to trade the bishop on D6. But I just think any move from black that sort of threatens to take the knight, white's just going to put it straight into D6. Why D6 and not C5? Because this move is going to force that trade by displacing the king. And then you're going to see what Amin has in mind, which is he's trying to create an opposite colored bishop situation where he's hoping that Wesley's dark squares are going to be quite weak, and it's going to be very hard for Wesley to fight in the middle game if White's ahead in development.
Right. 94 has been played by Tabatabai, and it is fascinating to think all his pieces are on the back rank, and he is still trying to find the best squares to develop. Meanwhile, we do have the updates in the other game. Maybe we can go there while we're waiting moves in here. So after c4, knight d7, and Shakir clearly wants this knight out of the board.
Yeah, wants to fight that e5 square, right? This move is consistent with g5, covering this square in order to fight for this square. And look at that. He got his objective. Hikaru has retreated, and now Black can start looking at moves like e5. The moment that knight backs up, Black can start looking at e5. I know d5 is hanging, but sometimes you can play e5 anyway. Other times you can trade on c4 and then push e5. So I think that's the big thing the Black's going to be looking at here. On Hikaru's last move before that, c4, I want to say that's like the best way to cover the weaknesses on the c file is to advance the pawn and gain space with it. And White can look at either playing a hanging pawn position or in some cases pushing c4, c5 and getting a strong pawn majority on the queen side instead of, a backward weak pawn in a minority attack situation. So c4 is a natural move here, but maneuvering. Where's this knight heading?
To d6. He's going g6. He's going to g6. He's going then to h4 or f4. So this is the reason why Hikaru played so fast c5. Now attacks the bishop. And next move, David, he wants to play b4 and b5, as you just mentioned. That Hikaru shouldn't waste here any of the time and start to play on the queen side to look for some counterplay. If there is moves like queen c7 and tries to battle up with the bishop, to checkmate White, you can always play knight f1 or knight f3 to stop that checkmate or check coming on the board. So b5, b4 is on the board, and b5 is just on the way.
Yeah. Okay, he plays knight f3 quickly. So another nice thing about b5 is if you chase this knight away, it helps you to control d4 and e5, which are kind of the key squares in the center here. Yeah, I'm surprised Shak played knight f8 so quickly. I mean, obviously the knight's headed somewhere good, but I just feel like when White's played this g4 move, if you have any chance to open up the center, I feel like you have to look at it pretty seriously. It's not that Black's position is bad the way Black's playing, but in a locked position like this, the g4 move just is not yet as big a factor. So it's giving, I don't know, I feel like Hikaru still has some room here. Obviously, Black's got an outpost on f4. The Black queen's probably going to play on f6. I feel like that's the direction that Shakir is going with these pieces is queen on f6, maybe knight on f4. But
but White kind of got some space on the queen side. Also, this knight d3, knight f3. They clearly wants to just control e5 square. If White manages to control this e5 square, this is gonna solve a lot of problems on the king side, right? It just blocks the bishop on this diagonal and stops also itself e5 pawn to be pushed.
Yeah.
So
and if
F6,
you can keep both Black rooks out of the game, then it doesn't really make sense that Black can kill you until they can get them in.
Right. F6 has been played. This stops knight coming on e5, and you know what I really like here from like king f7 move and rook h8 to start to go after h pawn on the.
It feels
side.
like more the direction of how Mamedyarov is playing this game. Honestly, is this kind of maneuvering. So that makes sense. We've got a big update in the other game though, because I think this is good news for Wesley, but he got queens off the board.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation. Queens are
went straight into d6 as we expected. Right. Now here I would expect Wesley to play f6 to try and control some of the dark squares. White gets ahead in development. If Black plays e5, saying like, oh yeah, I've taken control of the dark squares, no problem, then white just takes it. I mean, I don't need to calculate anything to know what Wesley's going to do about that. I mean, to know what Tabatabai would do about that, right? He would just sack rookie one. That's what he wants. So, so I guess Wesley came up with his queen b6 move.
He didn't really force the queen trade, but Tabatabai was happy to trade the queens and then pushed c4.
So he could have played, you're saying he could have played queen c3 if he didn't want a queen trade?
Yeah, I guess. Or just, yeah.
And then maybe queen b4. Interesting. I'm surprised that white was so happy to trade queens, but it's true that white still has a big lead in development. But let's see, what's white supposed to do in this position to make something more out of it? c4, creating some tension on d5. So now if black ever tries to really block out the dark squares with the e5, they would be sacking this pawn. Looks like black needs to develop the knight to h6 at some point. And then
that can be captured then on h6 just to ruin the pawn structure. And David in this position, c takes d5, c takes d5, and rook d5 in fact is a threat now. This rook sacrifice, if you take the rook back, then bishop a7 wins rook on b8.
I'll put a move on the board so we can show people.
Maybe in this
point.
case we cannot.
Rook d5,
we cannot
pawn takes d5, and you want to go to a7?
Yeah, rook a7, bishop a7, or bishop h6, both possibility.
Right, bishop h6 could also be really good, but you can get something like this. If black plays king f7 to defend the rook over here and show white that they blundered a piece with the rook sack, then you've got rook e7, so you'll still get a piece over here, and then you can take, and you've won a pawn with a great position.
Right. Something really strange happened in the game. So knight h6, king af7 first.
Yeah, this made sense because of these tactics. So black's still a move away from maybe playing knight h6, rook d3, maybe going to a3 to try and win that isolated pawn. Black plays knight h6. What else are they going to do? That's the move that they want to play. Knight f5, bishop c5. Interesting. And h5, supporting the knight on the light square from which it can control some dark squares. So that a pawn, Wesley doesn't seem worried about it. Or he can't do anything about it. But
strange. He cannot do actually too much about it. Probably he doesn't want to play rook a8 passive move. But what is his idea after white takes this a6 pawn? Maybe at some point he can also just trade the rooks, attack a2 pawn, and then take c4 pawn. That's probably a possibility.
Yeah. He can get something like this. And also, he doesn't even need to take this necessarily. He could just play rook a4 and say all his pieces are great. He can also play e5. And you see that all the black pieces are looking quite nice right now. Black's pieces are good. The king can come to e6 at some point and collect this one. So black would just kind of have this extremely strong center, well-placed pieces, pretty much full compensation, I would say. It looks like they might have just played this whole line.
Yeah, exactly like this.
King b1 was not exactly what we thought, but this is their live position. So I think Wesley has survived this opening completely, and white would have to go back and come up with a plan other than rook a3 here to make more of an impression on black's game. I feel like whenever black plays knight h6, my first thought is that white should have maybe taken it whenever that happened. And then play the knight against the bishop.
When I saw knight on f5, I was like, no, don't let this knight out.
Don't let this knight, yeah.
Because it's going to be a really strong piece now in the center with these pawns. Wesley just survived so far in this middle game. David, shall we go to the other game? I think things are heating up there. As Shag just played king to f7, and Hikaru seems like he doesn't really care about black's plans, and he's keeping his idea here to just develop the pieces.
Yeah. But he's stopped here and he's thinking instead of just playing rook a e1 quickly. So I wonder if he's considering something else.
B5 can be a move here.
He could be looking at B5, or he could be looking at knight E5 check, F takes E5, knight takes G5, unveiling the queen's threat on the knight on G6. So he could be looking at knight E5 or B5.
Shall we see this on the board? 95 looks
you want to see 95?
White can guarantee a draw there.
So the idea is to come here, and then after this, you could at least get a draw with knight H7. And maybe you could take here even. After king G5, bishop C1, the king can't get back anywhere. King H4. Feel like, oh yeah, now I can get this.
Yeah.
So the other move would be knight F4, and we'll take it here, probably draw the king forward, maybe play queen G6 to cut him off.
Survive. This king cannot really
It can't, right?
Here. No way. You can also give a check here. That's so nice line and so tempting, but instead Hikaru played a rook to E3. I don't know what is his idea. Maybe he wants to do same, but to have this rook on F3 to
right. Rook F3 could be useful for that. It makes you wonder if he couldn't have gone to E3 in one move when he played rook E2 one or two moves ago, right?
Yeah, that's a good
rook
point.
H8 played by Shock. So now there's no knight H7 check for one thing. So I think the whole knight E5 idea might be out now, but we do have rook F3, but then knight F4, and we want that knight hanging over there. Yeah.
Right. White.
And if rook A E1, maybe he just ignores him and takes on H3 and takes on E6. That would heat up for you.
Yeah, that's interesting as well. To take this E6 pawn can be also some sort of weakness there. I was thinking that to happen by B5 to kick this knight out, and then to take on E6, and then crazy things can happen. Rook to E1. He's giving up H3 pawn, and he is instead taking E6. Is that a good trade?
He does also have knight G5. So rook H3 is not even a move just yet, I'm realizing. Sort of indirectly protected for the moment. So yeah, so he's attacking this pawn, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on Shock, because if Shock plays rook C to E8, B5, oh no, the knight could go to D8. That wouldn't be so bad. He could keep this defended. So rook C E8 looks okay. If Hikaru's pawn were on G2, I would definitely prefer White's position.
True. I'm even starting to like this position, even with the pawn on G4, because we saw so many tactical motives here. There can be some like knight G5s, and even if White gets 2 pawns and exposed black king, that can be enough for Hikaru to feel comfortable to play. So yeah, let's wait a bit here for Shock's move.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even in a position like this, I'm going to play A6 just to show an idea, which obviously he's not going to play. But there may be some scenario where we could still go for this kind of an attack here. And then on knight check, king here, take here, and then just put your bishop on C1, you know, and play some weird version of this. So here's the live position. Rook E1 has just been played by Hikaru, and we could check on the times. It's now officially a blitz game for Shock. He's under 5, and checking the other board below us. Still, it looks like Black's collecting the D6 pawn when they want to. Wesley's made more progress on the king side. I can tell you Wesley's trying to win this game, even though technically he's down a pawn, Kati, because what we see is he's put every single pawn on dark squares. Look at H4 and then G5. And in opposite colored bishop endgames, if you want to draw, you try to put your pawns often on the color square of your bishop where you can defend them and their bishop can't attack them. But if you're trying to win, which can be a lot harder, what you have to do is gain control of the opponent's color of squares with your pawn structure. And we can see that that's exactly what Wesley has been doing, right? So
to get more space for his pieces. And David, at this point, when White played a4, Black could not take the pawn on d6 because of the tactics there. Even when the bishop was on d7, because there is knight d4 check, earlier when I saw this, the bishop was on d7 and could not be
okay, when the
this
bishop was there, we really couldn't. Yeah. So bishop e8 could be played for multiple reasons. For one, it could be because of knight d6, knight d4 check, and the king can't hold this piece properly. So it could be to threaten knight d6. It can also be, to threaten a move like bishop h5 and or bishop g6, right? Just activating that d7 bishop gradually. But a4 is very committal because now he trades, and if White takes back with the b pawn, this is hanging. So I'm expecting b4 from Amin, but there've already been moves, and he did not. He just gave that pawn on b3 as well. Oh, b4 would have allowed rook a4 as well. Yeah, a4 looks risky by White.
It's too risky, and either it's a blunder, David, or he just wanted very badly to save d6 pawn, and he believes that as long as the d6 pawn is on the board, he can hold the position. Maybe not to win, but hold it.
But so Wesley's given up the d5 pawn and some of that strength in the center to win back one pawn, right? But I imagine his idea here is bishop f7, bishop d5, and the d6 pawn looks isolated and dead again, in addition to whatever pressure he's got against g2 or against the white king with rook b8 to b3 as a follow-up. It looks really bad. He's planning to play a5 to keep this rook out of the game. But I think we'll still see bishop f7, d5, and knight takes c4, knight takes d6 headed towards c4.
Yeah. That's the one plan, and this a pawn cannot really make any progress for now. That's too risky position for White. White also could trade the knights at some point, David, and to get the different color bishops on the board, and could try to hold there. It was a possibility when Black played bishop to e8. Tabatabai maybe.
But that's a dream for White at the moment, to trade off this amazing knight. Black has set up the pawns to hurt White's knight, right? Every black pawn is cramping this knight on f3, and Black's knight is amazing. It's headed to c4 here. Another fantastic light square from which it'll fight for White's control of all those dark squares. And I'm feeling very, very good about my prediction that Wesley would win this first game, even though the opening looked so bad for him.
Yeah, David, can we go back to bishop e8 just for a moment? There was the one chance that White could trade the knights. When Black played here, bishop e8, knight d4 still was a chance to trade the knights, give up the 6 pawn, but you can then push the queenside pawns.
Right, that might have been the dream for White, would be to get those pieces off the board. I assume Black would just take this pawn because if you let White play c5 or bishop c5, it's going to be gone. So I assume we would get a position like this. The bishop would go somewhere here. And the question is, Black can get these pawns on e5 and d4, bishop on g6. Is it enough to put White in serious danger in the endgame or not? Hard question to answer. That was probably White's best defensive chance that we've seen in this last sequence here. Good call, Ketty. Knight d4 could have been done. Instead, we saw a4, which looked really sketchy, really risky. It sort of weakens some light squares on b3 and c4. And Wesley went right for that change in the pawn structure. a5 has just been played. Bishop d5. Rook c2, stopping knight c4.
This is just so bad for Tabatabai. He had such a good chances here to win this game, but now he lost this pawn. David, let's go to the next game because something crazy is happening there. At this point, when we thought that he will guard e6 pawn, he just ignored this and fled the king to f8.
So this is he's trying to trade rook e6 and rook h3 without knight g5 check. That's the idea here. It feels a little discoordinated for black, though, to have the king between the rooks and, you know, the e-file might be opening. I feel like there's pretty decent chances for Hikaru in this position. Shak took the pawn and Hikaru took the pawn. So the pressure is on and both kings are opening up.
Wow.
Hikaru is threatening mate in 2 right now, incidentally. I mean...
Rook e8 and queen e8. Earlier in the chat, some of our viewers said that king g8 is the best move by the engine instead of king f8, and now actually it makes sense. He could play this king to g8 right away. And
right. I mean, that was only like one move ago, right? Or 2 moves ago. King here, f8 in this position could have been king g8, I suppose. I don't know if there'd be a reason that king g8 would have been worse at this point. I don't know. It's hard to tell at the speed that the game's going now, right? Because there's only a minute for Hikaru here. So the moves are going to start flying now where it's going to be hard to keep our eye on both boards. I see that Wesley retreated the knight from d6 to c8 to try and make progress against white's bishop and pawn that are defending each other. Hikaru is coming into the 8th rank here. He's going to penetrate. Black plays king h7, and then he brings it back to e3, threatening our old friend knight g5.
That's a good thing. What happens after king g8
repeating
now?
Oh, I predicted a draw on this board, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Oh no, you did this last time too. You said all the draws and one decisive result, and it happened. And now this can be a draw again. Oh no.
Sorry. I think Hikaru needs Mamedyarov to trade on e8. That would be what Hikaru would want here, to get control of some squares inside black's camp. But it's clever of Mamedyarov to just play king h7 and leave the rook and the queen here defending each other. Yeah.
Right. Less than 2 minutes on the clock. It's also not easy to make this decision from Shak's side. We can see now the engine says that black is better, but to make here the correct move and accurate move is not easy to play.
Do you know what the correct move would be for black to get out of this repetition as Shak takes down to 1 minute himself?
What?
As Shak's getting down to 1 minute, do you see how he should play to get the computer's advantage to avoid
the repetition? I don't know that. Okay. I don't know. Is there moves like knight f8? No, they are repeating it, David. They are repeating it. So after
they repeated one more time, yeah.
Now knight g5 is a threat, so king g8 is forced. You cannot.
Yeah, I mean, you can play king h8, but then it's the same thing. I think after rook e8, I don't see a difference between king g8 and king h8. Maybe you could play knight h4. No, because when white wins the exchange, the rook will defend queen h2, right? So you can't do something fancy like, oh, he avoided the repetition, Ketty.
No.
Wow.
Okay, I don't know what I want anymore in this game.
You don't know what you want? I know what you want. You want blood. You want somebody to win the game. You want me to be wrong.
I want to see Armageddon indeed, because that's really exciting for us to commentate and also for the viewers to see. But rook h6, Shak knows that he is slightly better here.
Just avoiding knight g5 by tucking the rook.
Just giving.
And actually, I mean, all white's pieces are being frustrated by this one pawn on f6. I mean, I'm still wondering if you can't play knight e5, b5 first maybe, but some version of knight e5, pawn takes e5, knight g5 check, and then pawn takes on e5, just with 2 pawns and
Right.
You know, got to do something.
Yeah. I like that. Also, dark square bishop can be open up next move.
Right.
And white's piece. For now, this bishop on b2 is not really helping too much.
I was going to say, I think he's going to go for something like that because I was realizing that knight c4 is going to be maybe annoying. But honestly, I guess he doesn't care if the knight takes on b2. That would be good news for white. So he just played a simple move. He just brought the rook here. Maybe looking at the knight, maybe still some knight g5 ideas are somewhere in this position. Although
yeah,
now if you play knight d to e5 here, instead of taking it, black can play knight f4, right? And
but there's queen c2 check. You can get avoid of that.
Okay, queen c2, and we keep playing. That would be really messy. Something else just happened. Rook h3, rook e3, rook h4 instead of h6. Okay. Queen
what?
c2.
Oh, we cannot take it because it's a checkmate in 2 moves. If you take this rook, queen h2, queen h1 is a checkmate. So Hikaru had to play this queen somewhere, and he went to c2, pinning.
Oh my goodness! So he just lost this pawn on g4.
Oh my god!
And the knight comes into a light square. Rook e6 played again here, threatening something on g6 at some point, but he's gonna have to pull the trigger soon because things are getting worse for his king. He's already lost a pawn. His king's almost out of squares. Hikaru is going to need to pull the trigger on one of these knight e5 moves at some point soon because I don't see any other dynamism for his pieces. They're just sitting here getting controlled by black's pawn structure for 10 moves now.
Right, queen d7 has been played, and then c6? What is that? Attacking the queen, getting maybe c5 square for the knight?
Some kind of distraction tactic. Yeah, knight c5, a clearance sacrifice. Black took. Hikaru used the square. So now, is he finally ready for a tactic on g6?
Look at the evil bar. It goes all the way up and gives white a huge advantage.
That's crazy. If you were playing this game, it would be not obvious to you that you had just had such a swing.
No.
He's a minute ahead on the clock now, which is pretty nice. They've got a pretty big increment, Ketty. You can correct me, but I feel like it's about 10 seconds.
It's 10 seconds, yes. Okay. Usually when you play Blitz, you have only 2 seconds increment and things are going crazy on the board. But now 10 seconds can be a lot in some positions.
Queen C7. I have no idea why the eval bar is so high, by the way, Ketty. I don't even know what anybody's doing here.
Same. I think somewhere rook e7 to use the spin, chase the queen.
The queen would probably come to f4 though.
G7.
The queen would probably come to f4. Bishop c1. Finally, that piece gets improved, covering queen f4. King h6, getting off the diagonal of the queen. Whoa, okay, now I'm starting to feel scared for black. That's a lot of pieces near the king. If that rook moves away, Hikaru can take on g5. And if the rook doesn't move away, Hikaru intends queen takes rook.
It's a resignation. After queen f5, there was a resignation.
Wow.
That is a shocking result. Shah could just repeat the moves. Made 3 times repetition in the position. He wanted to win this one. He risked too much and then he fell for the tactics. Yeah,
I mean, we've got another game still going, but I'm just shocked. I mean, he went for rook h4, rook takes g4, and that loses him the game in like 3 moves somehow.
Right.
I mean, here he was avoiding repetitions. He wins this pawn, and then somehow this queen d7 maybe was a mistake because then c6 and knight c5 came with tempo. Maybe the queen was already on the right square here. Maybe he should have been doing something else. I don't know what. But once Hikaru got that knight c5 move, he fixes the bad knight on d3, then he fixes the bad bishop on b2, then he brings the queen in, and that's enough. 3-move turnaround.
That's it. Rook is hanging, and also David g5 pawn is hanging, and it will be checkmate. So Shak just resigned there.
Well, so I've got one prediction wrong. You can celebrate that. The game was not a draw. We can go to the Wesley So game, see if I can get one of them right. It looks like Wesley is up 2 pawns now.
Right, 2
Pretty
pawns.
good. Pretty good. Oh, and
Bishop
the knight on c2 is
versus
not very
knight.
good. That knight does not look very good at all.
Oh, what's the time situation? Look at these 2 minutes for Wesley. That's too much. That's too much. And Tabatabai struggles on the second. Wow.
Oh, there goes another pawn. Potentially.
Yeah, if you take that pawn, maybe knight f3 is the idea here.
Knight d3 going to e5. Wesley has to give up the c5 pawn to stop knight e5, but the g2 pawn is his whenever he wants it. I mean, there's seldom been a pawn so dead, right? Like g3 is completely controlled by black. You can take this absolutely whenever you want to. No need to take it now if you don't want to. You could fix the king and the bishop first if you feel like it. It looks like Wesley's essentially 3 pawns up, 3 healthy pawns.
Yeah, I can also play e4 right away just to get more space in the center and
oh
then
yeah,
play
just
f3
stop knight
and create the
d3 and
pass
start queening.
Yeah.
Yeah. My instinct is king f6. Then I can move the bishop. There's a few less things that could go wrong, maybe.
Yeah, just to get out from the pin, and king f6 is on the board. That's a good guess. Knight d7 check and king to e6. Hold on, what happens after knight c5 check?
I don't know. Centralizing the king. I didn't plan any of this. I just wanted to move the king.
Wow, nice. If you take the bishop, I take the knight, and I have 2 extra pawns in the winning position, so you cannot trade the pieces in that way. You have to save the knight.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great solution from Wesley. Knight goes there. So what's wrong with bishop to g6? Rook g7, maybe going after the g5 pawn.
Right. There's also knight f6. Black has to be a bit careful with that.
Right. So perhaps bishop e6 then.
Yeah, bishop e6 is on the board, knight f6 and king to c6. Just decide to get rid of everything, get out from these threats.
Now, this move is no problem. You can bring the bishop to f5 like you want. I was wondering if white could try some trick like rook g7 hitting the pawn, rook g2, and then rook e7 trying to win the pawn on e5. But even there, black has king d6 just defending everything. So
right, bishop f5 now, and white can run out of the checks here. There's no check, and also it's quite hard to find any move.
Yeah.
Before can we be played? Oh, knight e8.
Yeah. Otherwise, black was probably going to play king d6, kick the rook away, king e6, and the knight would be weird on f6. So this keeps the black king away for the moment. And if black plays rook g2, white has rook takes e5.
Right. There is a check. Black just kicked this king out and now takes the g2 pawn. He gives up e5 and he hopes that he will get h3 next move and then just rolls the pawns over.
Oh, wow. White doesn't even take it? I mean, you can't checkmate with rook and knight here. So
yeah, bad news for white indeed.
Yeah, really bad news. If you don't even take that e5 pawn, you are truly dead. Oh, the king even centralizes. Now to d4.
King d4 gives no check. King e4 in fact can be a blunder because knight d6 wins the bishop. Oh, he will get this king to h2 cover by the rook and white's pawn, and that will be just that's it.
Yeah, white playing for knight d5. Wesley could take the last pawn off the board and just look at white hard. But yeah, bishop d3. This is a very nice square.
Right. there are still some checks, but this king is just, yeah, and the game has been named at rook d3. White resigned. What a start of tiebreakers here, David. We had two decisive results, and Tabatabai started really nicely. He had a chance to get something bit out of the opening, but another game, Hikaru and Mamadero, that was incredible. So full of tactics and pins and the sacrifices and the craziness.
Yeah. This is I learned something there. I learned something there from that Hikaru game. Definitely wondering about bringing the bishop from b2 back to c1 earlier. That's kind of an idea for me now in that kind of structure, to play bishop c1 maybe sooner and look for all the sacks on g5. You know, if your pieces are limited by the opponent's pawn structure, just try to crack through. At least in rapid chess, it would work. I don't know if you could do that in classical, but you could try.
Yes, David, and what I learned from Hikaru from this tournament is that no matter how bad is his position, he's always trying to find tactical response. And in most of the times it works. As you can see, he is now the leader in the match against Shakir Mamadero. You guys, second game is just on the way. Now players are taking a little bit break before the next game. So we will also take a break, get some energy, and we'll be back right before the start of the second game. Welcome back, everyone. This is Tiebreakers of the FIDE Grand Prix 2022, and we do have here 4 semi-finalists fighting for the best. And David, we had what we wanted to see, 2 decisive results. Hikaru Nakamura got the point, and now he is leading the match. And Wesley So also came from the death and tried to just bounce back, and he managed to win the game in the end game. There was 2 very nice games indeed. But David, let's now choose your favorite game from this round and start to take a look once again.
Yeah, what I want to see are some of the key moves from Wesley right around the time that our attention was taken up with Hikaru's rook e6, queen f5. We missed a couple important moves when we left off in this game. I think we'd been around here perhaps, and we'd seen Tabatabai put the rook on c2 and prevent knight c4, which had been my idea for how Wesley was maybe going to make progress in this game. So Wesley was up a pawn here, but how did he progress this advantage further against White's a pawn? He started with knight c8. And looking at it now, I guess the idea is that if the bishop retreats, he could play rook to b8 and activate his rook there through b3. And White's king would actually be pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, lots of forces, and the king is already in the edge of the board, so that's quite unpleasant thing to allow Black's rook to be so active.
Yeah, so White left the bishop there, put the rook on b2 in advance to protect this pawn if Black trades on b6. I'm not sure what else Black is going to do with those 2 queenside pieces trapped. So Wesley did make the trade, and then rook a6 instead of rook b8. I guess the rook's more active from this direction, and he can put the king in front of the b pawn if he needs to. If king c5, he can chase it back with rook a5.
That's a good point, David. For instance, if rook goes on b8, then White can play king to c5, and it's just next move can be rook somewhere to get more active, or knights to go around, because this knight on f3 is not the best piece. And now if you just decide to, okay, I'll go back because I don't like this position of my rook, and play rook a8 and hope that White will also repeat, then b7 can be quite unpleasant here, and rook b6 king b6 can be the next move. So this is, I think, unnecessary complications here for Black, even though the engine says it can be still fine. But,
right, the engine says you can still do it, but we can see as humans that this rook on b8, letting the White king come here uncontested, actually this rook a6 move looks really excellent from Wesley, keeping all these active options for the rook, and you can use the king to blockade the pawn as needed. Tabatabai just retreated the king backwards, and Wesley brought the king. Look at that. And it took White a long time to fix the knight, long enough for Wesley to encircle the b6 pawn. And that's how we got from what we'd seen before to what we saw after the Hikaru game ended, was a position like this. I guess he's got in mind rook d6, c5. It's hard to take the time to take a pawn and then get back to the middle of the board and not drop something else. But yeah, and then this is sort of like what we saw.
Yeah, the rest of the game was nicely played by Wesley. He literally gave no chance for Tabatabai. That was really nicely played. David, the other game will start soon in any minute, and we do have now 2 live boards just below our videos, and we can see the moves when we receive them. Let's very quickly take a look at the prize fund of the tournament, because all these tickets for the candidate tournament are already taken by Hikaru and Rapport. So now we do have here 150,000 euro that these players are competing for, and the winner will get 24,000 euro and the runner-up will get 18,000 euro. Those two prizes very good. They are fighting for these two prizes and also the title, but for now they all has guaranteed 12,000 euro just being in the semi-finalists. So
Right.
yeah, let's get back to the chessboard and wait the next moves, first moves to be played.
So winning one of these matches today is worth at least $6,000. Sorry, 6,000 euros. I apologize for my American tongue there. 6,000 euro difference minimum just for coming through in these matches here. And Ketty, I know that you wanted to see an Armageddon today. So do you have a feeling which of the two players who lost this round, Mamedyarov or Tabatabai, do you have a feeling, is there one of them that you're rooting for or one of them that you really think has a great chance to win this next game?
I think that Wesley has to strike back now, because this is his last chance and he's with the white pieces. And we saw
but Wesley is, sorry, who needs to strike back?
Oh, sorry. I thought the Tabatabai. Oh no!
No, he's in the hot seat.
Point.
He lost with white.
I still remember the start of the game was very impressive by Tabatabai. How he played. Yeah, it was very impressive. So it's Tabatabai who needs to strike back, and in the classical chess he managed to do it, but he managed to do it by the help of Wesley, as Wesley just blundered their piece. So I think in this match, Wesley will be just very careful, just super careful. Will play some not impressive lines, but the lines that he knows is a drawish and equal. But the other game, David, I think Shahriar Mamdira will do all his best to strike back.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I didn't expect Tabatabai to be able to strike back yesterday against Wesley. I think if you're in a must-win situation, Wesley's one of the worst possible opponents to face, you know, as far as like players who can get a draw when they need it. I mean, just one of the absolute like toughest opponents. Now he's got to do it a second time. You could say the fact that he's done it once gives you some confidence that he could do it. Whereas Mamedyarov hasn't won a game yet against Hikaru. He's had a few draws, but you know, until you actually win a game against somebody, maybe you don't feel like you can break through against them. But I still feel it's a monumental task for Amin to try to win with black against Wesley. And just off of the white black, I would give Mamedyarov more chances of coming back because he's going to have the white pieces. That said, I don't know how he's supposed to do it, because in his white game yesterday, as you mentioned at the start of today's show, he did not have a good position out of the opening. And he was trying to win that game yesterday. He knew that he had white and that if he won the game, the match was over. He wouldn't have to go into rapid chess with Hikaru, who's, you know, well known to be good and faster time controls. So I'm sure that Mamedyarov, he didn't take it as must win, but probably as, you know, he would be well advised to win that game. And he did not get anything from that opening. So he would probably need some new opening idea here in this round if he wants to strike back against Hikaru, pull something out of his chess-based files.
That's right. I believe that now these players are at the playing venue or nearby with their seconds and the coaches. And we do know that Shahriar is helped by Rauf Mamedyarov, who's also a very tactical player, and that them together probably have a lot of interesting files and they can choose the best out of them. Yeah, that's a big task for Shahriar. It's just hard to come back in the situation when you need just a win, and we see both games starting with 1c4.
Wow. 1c4 and g3 played. And, you know, if he hadn't already played g3 before we saw the first move, My question to you, Keti, was going to be on what move 6, move 8, move 10, move 3, do you think Mamedyarov will play G4 this game?
Before 10 move.
Yeah. Because
Before 10.
I did not expect him to switch to E4. I was expecting him to play some kind of D4, C4 kind of opening. And he really plays a lot of early G4s when he needs a surprise. Maybe it's becoming less surprising, but so far he's got a good supply.
Right. It was so strange. For the moment, I thought that we just had some error and we had just one game on this both boards, but no, in the one board in the game of Shahriar Mamedyarov, he started C4 and then he went to G3, and the other board they started C4 and they went to the King's Indian opening. So I like King's Indian to see here that Tabatabai chose this to fight for the win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think whoops, clicked on the wrong game for a second. I think the King's Indian, despite being an opening, which I don't think is very good, I think Black can lose a lot of games with the King's Indian. I still think it's a pretty good opening when you need to win a game as Black. Actually, currently I'm feeling like there are lots of ways for Black to end up winning the game, things that can go wrong for White. So let's see. They've immediately got the center more locked up with D5 and C5. Do you play this kind of position with either side? Do you have a preference here?
Yes, I play with the white side, and that's why I know that when my opponent chooses King's Indian, I know that it's gonna be a lot of things going on. Now King to H8, David, this move means that he will play next move Knight G8 or Knight A8, and then he will push F5, and we're gonna see the King side attack here. On the King side, White can respond by F4 as well, just to fix the center and have this tension in the center, or White can start to play on the Queen side, which can be a little bit slow. So yeah, it's interesting what Wesley gonna choose here.
I would guess, and you can correct me since you've got more experience with this position maybe, but I would guess that if White wants to play it more on the safer side, then it's safer to meet Black on the King side with F5, F4, and try and keep all your pieces in the same area as Black, compared to playing on the Queen side and sort of trading. Whoa!
What is that? G4, we were waiting this from Shahriar. It's not Shahriar, it's Wesley.
No, it's the guy who needs a draw. And this may be very surprising to some people to see a move that looks like lashing out from the player with draw odds. And then Knight F3 as a weird follow-up too, I have to say. Knight F3 is more shocking to me.
It is. So F5 will be met by Knight G5, David. So if you play F4, then Knight E6 is an intermediate move, and you would love to have this Knight on E6. But the thing is, I think this Knight already makes a lot of problems here for Black.
I don't know. I mean, I would be happy if it took my rook, but maybe it won't.
No. Then I will drop my bishop. How about bishop D2 here?
Okay.
Yeah, bishop D2.
I can't play F3. No, it's not
I'll take it.
Not that powerful. So I'm going to bring this knight towards the king.
Right. And now F3 and the
trapped.
Yeah, the idea can be rook bishop E1 at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Takes. I am going to get my queen trapped at some point. I can see it. I'm going to play H5. You play like bishop E1, queen G5, H4, and win a piece.
G5, yeah. And this is also like you can always take the rook there. So you don't need to allow this knight G5 to be played.
Wow, that would be crazy. And even though it's a moment where, Amin is going to be thinking for a bit, and he's finally chosen knight to B6. No F5 yet. He respects that knight G5 threat. This is a weird position already, right? This is not what you normally see. Knight on b6 is weird. Those knights normally always head to the king side without without any exception. And a g4 pawn hanging for white. I mean, it looks like a transmission error, like the pawn should be on g2 in this position.
Yes, David, I was just I wanted to check if g4 has been played earlier, and I cannot see any games, but there is this position still favoring. Instead of g4, there are 3 other moves, but g4, I think Wesley just used one of his sacred lines here, because he is in the situation that he should not lose this game.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that although g4 is weakening and looks risky, in general, it is playing on the side of the board I would play for with white here. You've got enough space that even though black normally plays on the king side, as white, if you insist and you really want to and you keep all your pieces on the king side, you can just choose to fight the opponent on the king side yourself. So now h3.
Yeah,
that's looking really risky to me.
It is, David, this is possible to play here with white, but without castle. So you need this g1 square for the rook. So in case of f5, you just trade the pawns on f5 and get this rook on g file, and use this rook on g file, and now king is there. And later or sooner, black will strike in the center with f5. He just needs some time to prepare this one.
I mean, black can play f5 now because we're out of the way of knight e6 at the moment. And as soon as black plays f5, I would say black's threatening f4, closing off space. I don't think white could allow f4 here, not with the king on g1 and the g pawn advance. So I think if black plays f5, white's going to be all forced to either make some trades or have some kind of, knight g5, bishop g5, some kind of tactical move. f5 has been played. Wesley captures quickly, sort of agreeing that he can't just allow f4. I still think he can't allow f4. I mean, even more so almost, because h3 will be hanging. So I think he's got to take again.
White wants to uncastle here somehow.
Take it back.
Excuse me.
Take it back. Have you seen Quantum Chess, Ketty?
No.
There's like a variant of chess called quantum chess where you can sort of like twin a move. You say like, I'm castling king side and queen side. And then it's sort of like both could be possible. And the opponent doesn't know which it is until they try to, attack a piece or check a king. And then it checks if the king is actually there. So you could suddenly be like, oh no, my king's on c1, not g1. It turns out,
And Tamatava will say like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of that kind of chess. This game is incredible, David. I don't believe that Wesley is struggling 2 games in a row in the opening. This is incredible. But we have to take a look at the other game too. It's as much important as this one. And here we have 2 amazing players competing. Shahir with white pieces, Hikaru with black pieces. What is happening?
So far, it's much less shocking than the other game we're coming from. We've got all the pieces on the board, sound pawn structure, no weaknesses for either player. Probably a tiny edge for white, though I don't play like this very often, so it's harder to evaluate when it's not a position you play. But it seems like with no pawns in the center, that generally means that Fianchettoed bishops are stronger without any kind of a pawn center. And he's got both of them. They look secure on those squares. He's got squares like e4, d4, and e5 for the knights. So it seems like everything's nice about Shakhriyar's position. He probably has a little bit of an edge here.
Yes, just a little bit, I think. But Hikaru, now he just needs also draw, and he very often plays these positions with both sides Fianchetto bishop, so he is well aware of these type of positions. And now he plays knight to f6. So this knight f6, if white takes the knight on f6, will lead at least more piece trades. Bishop takes f6, and then bishops will be traded, or queens will be traded. So maybe white should keep this knight and play something like knight g5, and hope that you will get this weakened pawn on e6.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Hikaru having no weaknesses at the moment. Every trade, I think at the moment, I agree with you, would be favoring him to move the game towards a safer outcome. So Mamedyarov has to decide, is he trading a knight or trading a queen? Or I don't think you're really looking at moves like knight d2 just to avoid any trade at all costs. That kind of retreat, that's how I play when I'm playing odds chess. You know, if I'm playing down a rook or down a knight or bishop, you know, you play to sort of avoid trades at all costs, right? But I don't think that, wait a minute, he did just play that move?
Knight g5 is on the board.
Knight g5. He played knight g5, your move. Yeah.
Yeah,
so I don't think you can play that kind of avoiding trade style. You still have to play correctly. And so we've got a queen trade.
Okay, David, here, white will take with f rook, probably, and then black has to move the bishop somewhere because you don't want to give up this bishop, pair of bishop. This is a huge advantage in this end game, because also you're gonna have the pawn weaken on e6. So where is the bishop going now?
Ideally, it wants to go to d5, and I just wonder if white would have some e4 move there. So that might be why Mamedyarov's thinking on this move. It might look like, what's the difference? You just take back the queen. Why are you sitting and thinking on this move? And I'm thinking if you take with rook fd1 and bishop d5, then you don't have this idea of bishop f6, e4 because of the rook on a1.
Okay.
So that could be a reason in this position to maybe prefer rook ad1 so that black doesn't. Maybe if that's how you want to play against bishop d5.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. And rook to a to d1 has been played very likely for this reason, that the rook will not be hanging there. And now black has to find the square. Bishop d5.
You want to test this idea? See if it actually matters. Let's see if it actually matters. So feels like the bishop might have to go back to e6. And then I know white doesn't really want opposite colored bishops, but this is the only way to go forward. So I'm looking at it anyway. Maybe e5 to fix a pawn on a light square that you can attack later. Bishop to e7. We've got rook d7. Bishop, wherever the bishop goes, right? My idea is to get the rook into the 7th rank, maybe.
Sounds good.
And there's maybe also bishop h3 as a move first. My knight's hanging.
Oh, without d5. Yeah, that's right. Oh, bishop
like
goes
to somehow
all the way to c8, David,
maybe
in that position.
Oh, there's been a move. Let me see. Let me see. Bishop c8. What was wrong with bishop f5? I mean, we found a pretty interesting idea against bishop d5. That looked scary. That looked scary without looking any further. But what was wrong with bishop f5? Chat is telling me knight d4. Just simple, just continuing to chase that piece down as if a bishop were worth slightly more than a knight. It is.
Right, so rook, bishop to c8, and this bishop is passive. What he's hoping is that next move, he will play h6, and then will kick this knight back, and the bishop will be ready to develop. So h6 here is a serious threat, in fact, because you don't want this knight to be on h3. It's just too far.
Right. Yeah. So what can Mamedyarov do to put on a little bit more pressure? I mean, bishop c8, it's encouraging, but no weakness yet from black. So knight d4 here as well. Okay.
Is he going to sacrifice on c6 at some point? Not now, not now, but when you have this fianchetto bishop on g2, very often there is also knight 8, knight c6 sacrifices, but for now it's just not enough. Not enough to get back.
I guess one thing he's doing is this knight's preventing the bishop from coming back out after h6, right? But he played knight g5 before and not knight d4 because he didn't want a knight trade on this square. Okay, so that means if h6, we could expect maybe that his knight's coming back to f3 and then e5.
Just to keep all the pieces on the board, not knight e4, because it will allow black to trade more pieces. And
right.
In that case, I think it's time for Hikaru to bring the knight from a6 to on the board, but he decides to play rook to e8 first.
Well, your knight c6 move just got a little bit better here with a rook on e8. I'm just generally a little bit concerned by this rook e8 move, because I feel it's more pressing for black to get the knight out of g5 and extricate the queenside pieces. I don't know that having your rook on e8 instead of f8 is going to help you defend this position very much. But I guess part of the idea is to control the e5 square. So if the white knight comes to f3, then your rook is ready to keep it out of e5.
Right. Yeah, rook e8 is a bit mysterious move why he played. What is his idea? And in some variations, I would be really like, for instance, if white has pawn on h4, there can be knight c6 right away. This move working. David, while white is thinking here, let's get to the other game now. We can see on the small boards below your video, there is crazy things happening.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, unless, or honestly, even if Mamedyarov plays knight c6, this other game is going to be heated up faster. And it looks like Amin has just done something pretty decisive. I'm going to back us up a few moves so I can see Ketty. So we got here, which I thought looked semi-disastrous for white. Knight g5 was the only move to cover h3. So that's what was expected. Bishop h6, queen d2, fighting over the knight on g5. Threatening h3, the king. I thought the king would go defend that pawn, but just sidesteps it. Takes, here. Well, what? he just captured 2 pawns for free on the king's side.
For free, yes, and for some reason. Queen e3 has been played now. This attacks the rook on his e3, and probably there is some counterplay to the king side.
Good thing this bishop is defended, or that would have been the end of the game right there. I expect rook af8. The knight on b6 is looking pretty bad right now.
If rook a to f8, maybe this allows white to play knight d4 too, and white will bring more pieces on the king side.
Oh yeah.
And then bishop h5.
It is easy for white to bring the pieces. I'm feeling worried about the dark squares for black.
Oh,
something scary about winning.
Oh my God, David! In the other game, this knight c6 happened.
Okay.
What?
Knight c6 was played.
I was joking.
You were joking, and you were right at the same time.
Wow, what is happening?
Well, I would guess that what's happening is white's going to set up these pawns on like e4 and f3, double rooks.
You don't need to capture this rook right away because it's still pinned, and you can maybe just make the move.
Yeah, let black spend another tempo. You know, might as well spend a move getting this rook on f1 out here and setting up these pawns on light squares. e4. So here's the reason why, Ketty. We know we're going to trade our light squared bishop, and then we're going to have a situation with 2 extra pawns against extra minor pieces, right? So it's very important that the white pawn structure be very, very solid on the light squares. Look at that. He quickly plays f3. So he's just setting up so that black can't take control of the light squares, blockade his pawns, and make the extra pawns unimportant, because then the 2 pieces can outplay the rook. So white's pawns need to be flexible and need to be able to control the light squares pretty well.
I like this idea. The only thing that I don't like here for white is the knight on g5. This knight is just
where
lost
is that
there.
going?
Knight h3, knight f4 maybe to get on d5.
I forgot about that knight. I was so busy with my structure. Knight h3 maybe needs to be done next. Black doesn't have knight takes e4 at least, because on knight takes e4, white can take back with this knight.
That is right. So now Black has to move the rook, or he can also postpone this for a moment. But at some point, Black has to move one of the rooks, and then we're gonna see the end game with rook versus rook and two pawns versus two pieces. That's a good compensation.
Yeah. Yeah. In the normal course of things, white is now a little bit better with the rook and two pawns against the two pieces, and that bishop over on g6 not looking very good. But chat just suggested the move knight to g4, threatening bishop takes g5 and knight e3. If there's any move for Hikaru here, I think it could be that move, because otherwise I do think his position's worse.
Knight g4 is an incredible move. With this, it comes out of nowhere. Although this knight on g5, it felt it was just not protected there and was hanging. But knight g4 and e3, it's a hole there. And I think Hikaru is he can see this easily. Yeah.
I think he can certainly consider that move. I mean, if you've got your eye on this knight, it makes sense to look at all the moves for this knight, see if you've got any tricks. I mean, even knight d5 is a possible move. That's where the position's at. Knight d7, knight d5, any knight move could be considered. Knight g4 looks like the best one.
Looks very pretty. And oh my god, another game. So many things are happening as well.
Oh my goodness. Let's see it. So we saw queen e3. Rooks did double. Knight did come to e4. Knight c4 was the response from Amin.
What is that?
That we hadn't considered.
Idea? So bishop takes. Let's see, David, what he wants to do. And rook f3.
That was just sort of deflection of the bishop just to get into the f3 square. So now the idea is to play something like bishop f5, rook h3 maybe. But we should watch out. I mean, they could even be bishop g2.
Bishop
you have to
F1.
keep your eyes on every move.
Bishop f1, queen h3, checkmate.
Right. Bishop f1. The one thing is bishop takes f1 would get back and cover exactly those kind of squares. And the bishop is covering this checkmate I had in mind in some other variation. I was thinking something silly like, if you got this kind of a position here, that maybe you could
rook f1.
Play a back rank checkmate here. Wow. Even with the bishop, this would actually work. I mean, I played random moves for white, but
wow,
that was the idea.
Checkmate. Beautiful.
Hikaru has played knight g4, chat says. From the people who brought us the idea of knight g4 comes the news that the move has been played. And I don't see. Oh, Mamedyarov sees a way to stop knight e3 and bishop g5. Bravo.
That's nice.
Bravo, Shock.
That's nice.
Handles that. Let's get back to the craziness.
David, this bishop c1 was so important in the first game when Hikaru played.
That's true.
Remember?
That's how Hikaru won the first game.
Yeah. And now he goes like, okay, I learned from you.
Yeah. Learn this move from you. Oh, but look, Hikaru finds a spot. So this is good by Hikaru, but I don't think it kills the game. Because as long as this bishop's stuck on g6, I think white can still play the game, try and push for an edge. So yeah, the knight has to come back. Hikaru is going to force the bishop to trade.
That's okay, I think. You can take a8 rook or e8 rook and then rook d7 right away to attack a7 pawn. Oh, this pawn is not under attack. Bishop on e3 is just a very good piece.
Bishop on e3 is looking really, really good right now. Now it's much scarier than the bishop on g6 now that white had to give up their other bishop. And actually, that is a terrifying aspect of what's happened in this game, the transformation, Ketty. Black was not able to win anything out of that knight g4 move or break white's structure, but black traded a knight for a bishop, which means ultimately when white's playing this endgame with rook against two pieces, it's rook against bishop pair. I've seen I've seen bishop pairs beat a rook and 3 pawns, not to mention a rook and 1 pawn or 2 pawns, but.
And David, I will now suggest you to switch to the next game and you will see what is happening. Bishop and the rook combination.
This is always what I wanted to see, was this game.
What's that?
Bishop f6 check.
What's that?
I
so
don't.
if you take by the rook f8, there's rook g8 check, king g8, and knight f6.
Wait, if I take back with which rook?
8 rook f8.
Okay. You're going to go
and maybe rook g8,
now.
king g8, and knight f6. But engine is not happy because rook takes back and says like, I am winning here with white.
So queen g5, the rook can just escape. Right. Honestly, rook g1, rook g6. Black is up 3 pawns right here, and white doesn't have a follow-up tactic, I guess. Okay, so back to the game position. This is live position. Black is thinking about it. Probably needs to take that bishop.
Has to be taken.
Probably has to take the bishop. Knight f6. I would love to take with my knight, right? It's my worst piece. But my first impression is I don't know what I would do after queen f3. Now, there's queen f8 checkmate if I try to go for a follow-up. So
that's not so good.
That move might be out. Looks like Amin has just played rook takes on f6.
Yeah, rook f8 was better.
Rook f8 was better.
Rook g8 did not work because the fact that rook from f3 still hits the queen on e3, that wins a lot of time. So white has to give up the knight, and very strong knight.
But white could play this move and you can't trade queens. It looks like, oh yeah, we'll just clean up the game, you know, and after knight d7, bishop d7. But you got to be careful. White doesn't have to take the queen.
Instead, give a checkmate.
So here, I think the rook would have to come back again, right? And that should be, why would that be different than what's happening in the game? Why does it matter which rook takes on f6 first? Is it not the same position?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. You don't force anything. Now you have a choice to take with a knight or take with a rook. This is 2 choices you have. Maybe it's even better here that you have these 2 options.
Materially speaking, after black recaptures on f6, we're looking at knight and 3 pawns against rook. And the G file looks pretty good for the rooks. I mean, they've got a lot of play available. The bishop on c4 looks not so good, but I would call it a 3 result position. Normally this kind of a position.
Anything can happen. Yes, that's true. Anything can happen. And the other game, there has been a lot of trades. A2 pawn is gone.
Black lost, white lost a pawn here. So knight b4 forced the bishop to choose. Surprised it didn't take on a8. And white drops a pawn, puts the knight on d5. Oh, trying to say that the knight on a2 can't get out safely. And this is why Mamedyarov traded on e8, because he had in mind this way of dealing with the knight on b4. He's going to trade on b4 and take on a7. But I think black should be fine in this resulting position. I just believe in the bishop pair.
That's right, David. And you can also always play f5 maybe when you have these pieces traded. Just f5, activate your light square bishop and open up the position. This should be just fine here for black. If not more than 5, because black clearly needs here draw as well, and it's going to be winning.
I mean, draw odds means that black can, you know, safely make extra pawn trades and feel very comfortable. But if you needed to win as black, I think you could try that too from this position. So yeah, I think f5 is a good, safe way to just activate the bishop as soon as possible and make sure nothing bad happens. So I could see Hikaru playing exactly the variation you're mentioning. And look at that.
There we go.
He did. So he's looking good. maybe we should keep our eyes on the King's Indian. Maybe we should keep our eyes on the King's
to
Indian.
the other game. Rook takes f6. And
Rook f6 was the choice. And rook g3, right? The g file is the place for the white rooks. There's no f file as far as white's concerned. So rook g3. And then we're going to want the other rook to g1 and maybe queen g5 as needed. Oh, black's going to try to stop that file.
This is incredible. I love this idea. h5. And then you can bring this knight somewhere on f5. I like this. Knight h6, knight f5.
Knight h6 to f5 idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like a little risky to move your h pawn forward. You're loosening your king. But in a sense, you're also grabbing control of a little bit more space for your pieces here.
But I love this idea, bishop g4. Can white trade this bishop maybe at some point rook g1 and then bishop e2? Goes for rook trade first.
Oh, I see. Trading black's only rook. Yeah. That makes sense. Leave black without a rook. As long as we're not in an endgame, the extra pawns are not helping black so much. So black has to remember they're basically playing with a knight against a rook in a must-win situation. So black kind of has to guide it towards an endgame where the knight can beat a rook. That's really hard, even with a lot of pawns to work with.
Oh, the other game, some blunder just happened. Let's get in there very quickly. It seems like rook to b7 is a bad move.
What's wrong?
I think something is connected with rook, bishop h3 and bishop to g2 and bishop to c5.
Oh, bishop d2,
bishop c5 here.
E3,
you cannot take it.
Wait there. Bishop c5 first. Yes.
You cannot take it because it's a checkmate on e1, and then bishop g2 is a checkmate, and you cannot avoid this checkmate. And we had a resignation here. Hikaru Nakamura won the match with 2 points.
That's a beautiful move to end it too. Bishop c5.
Yeah, bishop g2 is on the board. You can't avoid this checkmate. You can play rook g1, but it's just losing. You just lose a piece. Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
That's shocking, David. Hikaru Nakamura has not played classical chess for a long time, and people were talking a lot about this, if he could show his best, but I think he's showing what he can do, and even more. It's just incredible how he's winning the games.
Yeah, I mean, he just he won both these games in 2 to 3 moves from a position that looks complicated, right? It's sort of like there's tension, they're in the game, and then suddenly just that turn. And part of it was we hadn't appreciated, that with f5 there was the potential to go rook e2. We just thought, oh, it activates the bishop, the game's going. I think we both just kind of assumed bishop would take on f5, but he's maximizing it with rook check here. On rook f2, he's got trades on bishop c5. So he pushes the king back before recapturing, puts some more pressure on white, and bishop h3 was a huge threat. So actually, I mean, white needed some very, very precise move here. And I think that's part of the pressure, is Hikaru's requiring such precision from his opponents, as we see him here in the bracket, moving forward to his second finals in this FIDE Grand Prix 2022.
Second finals for Hikaru. He's waiting for his next opponent. He is already in the finals, and perhaps he will stream today or will be a guest of his own channel, and we're gonna hear a lot from him. But still, we have one last game in the progress, and we don't know how this is gonna end. It can end good for Wesley, and he will join Hikaru in the finals, or we might have another 2 games in the blitz portion. So it is still so complicated, David.
Yeah. In the previous finals, he faced Levon Aronian. Here, he was in the same group as Levon Aronian. He had to take care of him in the group stage. He managed to do that despite losing the very first game in the groups to Levon, right? And he had to come back. And now he might face a teammate from the US Olympiad team, Wesley So, potentially, who is up 1 against Amin here. Only needs to draw this with white. I would say he's made it a little bit difficult for himself with G4, H3, Knight G5 at the start of this game. But anything could happen.
Yeah. That was too much, I think, from Wesley when he pushed this G4 pawn. Maybe in classical chess he could have more time to find the most precise way how to avoid this f5, but black wants to play f5 and you're never good in that positions when black goes with f5.
Yeah,
you try to play f3 and then bring this bishop on f2 and try to just hold the position on the king side, because you are just not any better there. Another idea, David, here in these positions are to play f5, e takes f5, g takes f5, and then f4. That could be also the option,
right.
but g4, that's another story, and turned out that it was not so good here for So. Well, but it's already fast.
As far as preparation or what he could have done in a classical game, it feels like his very first move after G4 just didn't make sense. It feels like he got some wires crossed or something, because, you know, he doesn't have room for F4. He doesn't have the pieces taking over the area. And Amin just, you know, plays knight B6. He defends with H3, F5, and this pawn on H3 was just hanging. Black had played F5 for free. And the position always looked pretty promising for black. So let's see, we've just had a queen trade in the live position. So Amin played queen f6 here, leaving the bishop hanging because of the recapture, defending it. And Hikaru just, and Wesley just traded queens right here.
Yeah, he is hoping to hold the position here, which is just, I'm starting to believe that black is just very comfortable. Can play king g7, king g6, f5, f4, start to activate this, and white has to activate the rook on the third rank. Maybe you can play rook b3, rook a3 to call for some weaknesses there.
If white can't break open a file for this rook soon, this is exactly the kind of position where the knight can beat the rook. With 3 extra pawns, giving that space for the king and the knight to slowly move down the board, you know, advance your pawns, encircle the d5 pawn. This pawn's as good as dead in the long run. So Wesley needs a sequence like, you know, rook a3, a6, rook b3, b5, a4, getting through somehow. But I don't know, b4, bishop a6, right, would be.
Oh, he managed to get a pawn.
Oh, wait, sorry. A lot of these moves just got played. So let me refresh the board, because I didn't realize that was actually happening. Rook a3, a6, rook b3, b5, rook back to a3. Okay. Slightly different. Bishop c8. Bishop takes b5 with rook a8.
Oh, wow.
It's what he needed.
Beautiful.
And Wesley has that sense of initiative. Like he's so hard to beat, and it's partly solidity, but it's partly dynamism. Like he knows when you have to, you know, seize the position. So now his rook is out.
This is different story already. White can start to create a pass pawn on the a file, and he goes a4 right away. If you take this pawn, I'll take it. And then knight is just too slow to stop the pawn. Yeah.
And we can see, I mean, the d5 pawn was still going to be dead eventually. He was never going to defend against black's center, right? If the knight, king, and 3 pawns slowly move down the board, he was never going to defend against it. So even after rook a8 to c8, he has to sort of seize the initiative and keep on playing to his own imbalance and strength that he finds in the position. And outside pass rook pawn, that's a hell of a task for this knight to deal with. It's a hell of a task for the king.
It is, and maybe we can have the position with rook versus 3 pawns, and that's a theory, and I don't know if anybody knows that theory fully, but 3 pawns versus rook is just not happening every day.
Yeah. So Keti's imagining almost the best case scenario for black would be to trade this knight for the A pawn versus, maybe the pawn's just going to queen. And then we can sort of forget about the H pawn. The question is going to be, what can the king and 3 pawns do against the rook?
Right, 17 seconds for Tabatabai. He has to make decision. He has to stop a pawn, which is for now, for me, just very hard to imagine how to stop that. Maybe king d7, king c6.
Very easy for Wesley to pick his moves too. I mean, you see 3 seconds for Amin, 4 minutes for Wesley.
4 minutes? Wow.
Rook takes b4, pawn takes b4, a6, b3, a7, b2, a8, b1, queen. So rook takes b4, the a pawn couldn't be stopped, but the tempi were just there for black to queen as well. So can the king come over and stop this in time? On king c7, there's just a7, right?
Yeah, it is. You can stop. So this is the moment when black has to take the pawn on a6, David. That's it. He has to do it now. Oh,
he plays a hopeful move. He's hoping for a7, knight takes b6, covering it.
Net.
But now just rook b8 gets played, and on
a7
king, king c7, a7, knight b6, rook takes knight. I mean, I don't see how black stops that pawn.
I really wanted to see here the rook versus three pawns, but it's not going to happen today, David. So we do have here another decisive result.
Yeah. Wow.
So this means that we do have 2 finalists already, and those are Hikaru Nakamura and Wesley So. They will face each other in the classical portion of the chess, where we do have a lot of hours of the play. David, do you think they will play long games, or they will try to make some draws and then go to the rapid portion again?
It's an interesting question, and I think they may have different intentions as far as that question. Hikaru may be happy to see the match go to a rapid tiebreaker. And if that's the case, then Wesley might be unhappy to, and he might make extra efforts to really put pressure on Hikaru in the classical games, or at least look for his chances in the classical games. I'm not trying to say that Wesley is better than Hikaru in classical chess necessarily. I mean, his rating is there, but Hikaru's been playing great lately. I'm just saying that he might feel like he has to look for every chance he has in that part of the match.
Yeah, David, and also today's match, what we had here, Hikaru never really struggled in today's game. He had the first game, it was quite complicated, but he feels very good in the complicated position where there are a lot of tactics. But Wesley, he was really struggling in both games against Watabai and had a really, really bad position in the opening, but then he magically holds the position in both games and then win the game in the end game. So these 2 players guaranteed the quite nice prize fund, and we congratulate to them indeed. And also Shahrir Mahmoudierov and Amin Tabatabai had amazing event, and I'm sure they are happy with their success. It's not easy to qualify at the group stage when there are 16 participants and you're just best 4, but they managed this, and after all, they should be happy. And David, that's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed to join the commentary at the Grand Prix, and I hope you liked these 4 games that we saw today.
Absolutely, it was thrilling. We didn't even get a single draw, Keti. So you see, I'm not always the problem. Yeah, I just want to say it was impressive how smoothly Wesley won from those 2 bad positions. I mean, he just completely won the games. This game here, Amin takes him to this end game that looks like that's sort of the dream scenario for black to eventually overflow white in the center. And Wesley won in 3 or 4 precise moves straight out of that bad end game. But when you think of Hikaru, it's hard to imagine Hikaru not winning this King's Indian game, right? If Wesley plays that loose with G4 and Knight F3 in a rapid game, you feel like Hikaru would probably come out on top. And that's, again, part of my reason for thinking that Wesley would really put all the pressure he can on Hikaru in the 2-game classical match. But we will see. We will see tomorrow, Ketty. I'm planning to come back and join you tomorrow and see how that finals kicks off.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, David, for your work today. It was amazing to see all these details. And also big thanks to our chat, who was also very helpful to us and suggested some incredible ideas that has been played on Twitch and also on YouTube. And big thanks to the producer who puts up this show together. So you guys, please come back tomorrow at the same place, same time, because we're going to see the finals. So see you tomorrow.